Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're having a good day. I've got a guitar build to do over the next two videos where I build this incredible LP style guitar. So thanks to the fretwire.com for sending it out for the build. Links below to their website where you can view all of their kits. Now, over the next two videos I'll be prepping and staining it, then I'll be putting all the finishing touches on it, and I'm going to make some changes that I think will work perfectly. Nothing too expensive though. The kit I chose was the LP style with the Spalted maple body. It just looks fantastic. I'll list all of the stains that I use below if you're interested. So let's crack on. The first part of this build is going to have to be done in the garage because the stains that I'm using are quite potent, so it's difficult to do it indoors. Let's start with the unboxing. Let's see what's in there. Let's see what we've got. Now this is the Spalted Maple LP style kit, and you get everything you need to assemble it. But look at that Spalted Maple, it's absolutely fantastic. There's quite a spec on there as well. The body's mahogany, you get a Tune-o-matic bridge, and you get a Rosewood fretboard. It's a 12-inch radius and you get 21 frets. Absolutely beautiful piece of wood as well, very well cut. And there it is in its full glory. It's just that Spalted maple that makes it look amazing, especially with that stripe down the middle. I was quite pleased with that. Let's take a look at the neck. The neck is also very well cut, plays very well, and the rosewood on there has a really nice grain to it. You've also got the block inlays, pretty standard stuff, and it's also a really nice piece of wood. I also do quite like the white binding around there, or it's sort of off-white binding, but it looks really nice and it goes all the way around the guitar. So the hardware that you get in the bag are unbranded tuners. They look okay, they feel okay, they're not the best, so you might want to swap those out at a later date, but they certainly do a job. The pickups that come with the kit are unbranded as well, but in my experience when I built the thin line telly, these pickups are actually pretty good. They sound really nice, really fat and really full. You get all the wiring you need, the knobs, bridge and tailpiece, etc. The bridge and tailpiece are absolutely fine. The knobs are standard gold knobs that usually go on these LP style of guitars, but I will be swapping them out, but they are decent quality. And this also gives me something to put in my toolbox, so that I've also got like a parts bin for future builds. Switch is good. I did swap the switch out as well because it does feel a little bit wobbly and there are slightly better switches out there. But if you're doing the build and you're going to use this switch, it's going to be absolutely fine. These cream cover plates for the back, I'm actually going to spray them. And you also get all the washers and screws etc. that you're going to need to do this complete build. Pots are in there as well. They are the dime sized pots, but they're fine. You can swap them out later if you want to for CTS, alpha pots, whatever you need. Always important to check the neck in the pocket and make sure that it's got a good grip. Make sure that it's not too tight and make sure that it stays in there. This one was absolutely fine. Let's go through the materials that I'm going to use. Now I am using this Minwax Mission Oak. I've used it before. I actually used it on some shelves in the house that turned out fantastically well because I do like that old rustic look, so I thought that that was going to work well on this guitar. Using various sandpapers, 600, 3000, 120 I used to get some of the binding off. Going to want a tack cloth as well just to get all the dust off it before I put the stain on. Now it does say in the instructions on the sanding, just sand lightly. You don't need to really attack this with sandpaper, just get it nice and smooth, which is why I'm just going nice and gently. I did notice here that the binding was quite high, so I did try 600, that wasn't going to work. So I got my little sanding device out with 120 grit paper. I was just careful with it just to take some of that binding down, and it worked perfectly for this job. Got it nice and smooth and got it nice and level with the body. I'm going to use the 600 grit here just to smooth things down. Again, I'm not attacking the guitar, just taking some of the rough edges off. Because I want the surface as smooth as possible so that when I put the stain on and also put the poly on, it looks fantastic at the end. So you get a nice end result, and I always tend to follow the grain as well. It's important to do the sides and the back. The sides more importantly actually, because that's where some of the glue may seep out from the binding, so I just take those little spots off. You can see a few spots there. And just cleaning them up, just taking out a few of those imperfections, because once you put the stain on, it will show up. So let's just take care of that. And a light sand on the back, although the back is nice and smooth anyway. And we'll do the back with a slightly different stain. And this is what my day looks like. It's actually a beautiful day, not too cold. Very nice. Perfect for working in the garage. Just going to go over the guitar with a tack cloth now, just to take off some of that dust. As I said earlier, just to get a nice smooth finish, so that when the stain and the poly goes on, you get the best result. For me, this is where the 3000 grit comes in, because that's almost like a polishing sandpaper. Oh, I'll put it there. It gives it a really nice and smooth finish, and you can feel it under your fingers. It's definitely worth doing this stage. Just do it nice and gently, go over the whole guitar, and you'll just get the best result in the end, as I've said. Now I sort of knew that this stain was going to work anyway, because I wanted a darker wood looking guitar. Because I like natural looking guitars, I like the natural finishes. I can never really decide on a colour. So I knew this was going to work, because I'd used it before in some little build projects around the house. And I snapped a glove. The stains that I've chosen for the build are Mission Oak, because that's quite dark and I wanted something nice and dark for the body. But for the back and sides, I'm using Early American. I've used that on a previous build and I thought it looked fantastic. Before, when I built the thin line telly, I actually put 2 coats of this stain on. You don't really need to. 1 coat of this stain tends to be enough. It gives it that nice finish that you're after. But once again on this one I did do 2 or 3 coats. It goes on really nice, and this is the moment when you're looking at your project, you're looking at all the work you've done, and you can see that everything starts to come together. It's important not to get too much on the binding if you can, because you've only got to scrape it off afterwards. It's not too much of a problem. Some people use a razor blade wrapped in plastic tape to get that off. I didn't have one, so I ended up using a small piece of 120 grit sandpaper. Yeah, also this is important. Don't forget to fill the bridge and the tailpiece holes with tissue paper or something to stop the stain going in there, because you're only going to have to get it out. It's not too much of an issue, but you're going to have to get it out. So you live and learn. What I also thought I'd do here, in my infinite wisdom, is try and do a burst by adding more stain around the edges. But of course that's not really going to work. You need to use a different colour stain, or at least leave it, or both, for that to work. It's not really going to work. So all I achieved here was just adding more stain with no more end result. It is really pleasing to see this go on. Once you've made your colour choice, and the way I do it, I just go online, I go onto Google Images, and then I just type in LP style guitars or LP style builds or unique builds or something like that, until I come across something that I really like, and then I try and work around that. That stain's gone on so well. And this is where I attempt to do the burst style finish, although, as I said earlier, it didn't really work. All it did was just add more stain to the guitar, which isn't an issue. It didn't change the look of it at all. But you've got to give it a go. Now, for the back and sides, I'm going to be using Varathane Early American. I used this on my thin line Telecaster build and that turned out really well, and I wanted something lighter for the back and the sides. Although, having said that, by the time this goes on, it is quite dark anyway. But it is a lighter colour, and at least it gives me some contrast, because I wanted the top to be darker than the back and sides. The reason I did that actually, because I went into Guitar Centre probably a couple of months ago, just had a look around, and I came across this Gibson. It was either a Gibson or an Epiphone, and it had this beautiful top on it and beautiful wood sides, and the contrast on that was really nice. It looked so good, so I wanted to try and replicate or duplicate that here. I've had experience with this particular stain before. It goes on really nice. It does look dark here, but by the time you've got the stain on and then wipe it off, it looks fantastic. It gives you really nice results, and because the back of this guitar is so smooth, wiping this stain off is such a great pleasure because it makes it look really, really nice once you're done. Could have let this just sink in and it probably looked okay, but wiping it off just sort of finishes it off, gives it a really professional result, really professional finish, I think. Now of course when you do the sides, because you've got the grain in the wood, or a thicker grain in the wood there, it's always going to come out darker on the sides. And this is where I decide to get the tiniest piece of 120 and just go round all of the binding on the guitar, on the sides and on the top as well. I'll show you the result of that when I'm done. It took around, I don't know, 15 minutes, something like that. Definitely worth doing, because once you have a look at the close-up shots, you can then see how the binding will then pop with the darker wood on top of the guitar. Decided to stain the neck with the early American again, just to give it a contrast from the body. And I did the headstock and the whole of the neck. Didn't use too much of this, almost just dabbed it into the pot and just wiped it on, because I wanted some of the grain in the neck to pop out, or the grain in the headstock to pop out, and the grain in the neck as well. One final touch on the neck, just to make sure it's smooth to play, because I'm used to having a really smooth sanded finish on the back of the necks, is to just rub over some 600 grit, and what that will do is almost give the back of the neck a really satin feel, and it feels really smooth to play. So I was really keen to do that. And of course, once that's done, I then use the 3000 grit polishing paper just to go over the back of the neck. It makes it really, really smooth. I'm using the same poly finish that I used on the thin line telly build. And now this stuff is really potent, so this was one of the reasons why I wanted to do this in the garage. And I used 4 coats of this in the end, and it takes around 2 to 4 hours between coats for it to dry, depending on the temperature and conditions obviously. It's really easy to put on, you just wipe it on, and once you're done, just lightly sand it in between coats. It's all this preparation that gives you a really good final result. I was really unsure whether to shape this headstock. It looked okay, but after talking to a mate of mine in the UK, my friend Al, he said, yeah, shape it like give it a Gibson-esque headstock shape. So I decided to do it in the end, and it really wasn't that difficult. I'd shaped headstocks before, so I had a good idea of how to do it, or what I was going to do certainly. It was just getting those curves in the wood, so I came up with a bit of an ingenious idea. And my ingenious idea was to use the curvature of our pepper pot. It seemed to have the correct radius. So it was just something that was lying around that seemed right, so I decided to wrap a piece of sandpaper around it and use that as a sanding tool to get perfect curves. Now, you might have a workshop, you might have all the tools necessary to do this. I just don't. I have things that are just lying around, and I like to be inventive and figure out how to do things using just hand tools. And I tell you what, it worked perfectly. Once I'd got the rough shape, or 95% of the shape, I just smoothed it down and rounded the horns using 120. 120 really does bite into the wood, so it's easier to manipulate in that respect. But it really didn't take that long, and it gave me the look that I was after. And here's the finished poly result. You should check this guy out, Jeremy Shepherd, the guitar hunter. He's got a great channel on YouTube. So that's the first part of the build done, and to be honest, I'm really pleased with it. But of course, next comes the modding and putting it all together. And that's the bit I'm really looking forward to. So I'll see you guys in part 2. The next stage for me is the exciting stage where everything comes together. And I've got right into modding guitars, so I will change a few bits out. I'll also leave those links below if you're interested. So I'll see you guys in the comments. I'll see you in the next video, because that's where the fun begins. Cheers.